This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to our Top 10 Endangered Artifacts Award ceremony. We want to congratulate all of our 2020 honorees and winners. And here to help me today, the president of the Virginia Association of Museums, Rob Orison.
Thank you, Jennifer. And again, as Jennifer just said, thank you to everyone for participating this year in VAM's 2021 Top 10 Endangered Artifacts. Everyone's been so flexible this year with the pandemic, and we wanted to continue this program. We didn't want to delay it for next year. We figured it was such an important program for VAM and for our members that we decided to do all this virtually. And of course, we're all getting used to the virtual world. So hopefully one day we will get together again soon and do 2022 in person. But for this year, we still want to do the program, and we're going to do our mini ceremony here virtually. For those who don't know, VAM's Top 10 program has been around since 2011. It was born out of an IMLS grant that we got, and we decided to continue the program because it was so successful and popular. It was a great way for museums to kind of get some good press, some good marketing about their efforts to conserve their artifacts in their museums. It's very much modeled after the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and here locally, Preservation Virginia's Top 10 Most Endangered Historic Site program. We have many partners who make this available to us and help us get this program going. Library of Virginia, Preservation Virginia, the Virginia Conservation Association, and of course the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. And we have a great committee of experts that look at all these honorees and decide on who their top item is. So for right now, the top 10 today has over 180 organizations from the program's very beginnings in 2011. Conservation funding introduced in 2017 as a way to kind of give museums a chance to get a little bit of funding to get some of these projects started. We've distributed $4,000 this year, which we're very proud to do during the pandemic. It's very important for many of these museums to get a little bit of funding here. We will have a People's Choice Award, as we do every year, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, the selection committee has a conservator award that they pick out of the top 10. Each of the remaining competitors will receive $250, which they can use towards conservation of these artifacts.
Thanks, Rob. Our 2020 honorees participated in a special program that we decided to do as a part of the pandemic, Conserving Diversity. We know that the museums throughout Virginia have collections from all of the populations that are represented in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and so we wanted to highlight some of those. So we asked our museums to nominate items that represent the African American stories, the Native American stories, female stories, immigrant stories from Virginia's past, and we received wonderful nominations and have a great list of the 10 honorees for this year, and we thought that we would review all of those for you today. The first on the list is from the Alexandria Black History Museum in Alexandria, Virginia, and it's the Moss Kendricks collection. And Kendricks was the father of Black public relations, and he founded his organization in Washington, D.C. to promote the buying power of the African American consumer. And this collection, which contains 41 linear feet of archival material, is a wonderful resource for anyone looking to study the history of African American consumerism in America.
All right, my turn. So our next item here is from Botetourt County Historical Society Museum, located in beautiful Botetourt, Virginia. It is a manual of religious instruction, which is a rare item because it's focusing on, it's prepared with a special view to instruction on a very numerous class of persons in our southern states, and that's actually from the book itself there. The existence of such a work recognizes the interests of enslaved persons in religious education and the determination of established church figures to reach out to the African American enslaved community before the American Civil War. And as anyone who researches this topic knows, religion is such an important aspect of this history, and this is a great artifact that reflects that history.
Next on our list is from the George C. Marshall Foundation in Lexington. This is a portrait of Elizabeth Friedman. Elizabeth could be considered another one of the hidden figures of our 20th century history. She was a crypto analyst, and she influenced today's intelligence community. This artist, Leon Engers, did this portrait, and along with this portrait, her papers were also given to the George C. Marshall Foundation so that hopefully she will no longer be hidden going forward into the future.
Next up, we have a weather journal of Washington Stevenson from Highland County Museum in Highland County, Virginia. A handwritten daily journal including weather, local happenings, and visitors from 1837 to 1867. I can tell you, as a historian myself, having access to these type of documents and preserving these kinds of documents is very important in helping us tell the daily life from people in the 19th century. Even though it seems maybe kind of mundane to some of us to keep those journals of what's going on with the weather, it's great access for us historians today to kind of interpret the lifestyle of that 19th century period. Washington Stevenson was the first elected sheriff of Highland County, so his insight is pretty important, and we're happy to help preserve this artifact.
Next is the Montgomery Museum of Art and History in Christiansburg, Virginia. This is a coverlet that was created by an enslaved woman in Montgomery County. So according to family lore, this bed covering was woven by a slave on the plantation of Catherine Montague Trigg, the widow of Thomas Trigg, for her stepdaughter, Catherine Mosby. So we don't know much about the artist who created this quilt, but it's wonderful that it does still exist.
So one of my favorite artifacts from this selection, it features one of my favorite boxers, Joe Louis. Comes from the National D-Day Memorial Foundation in Bedford, Virginia, home of the Bedford Boys from D-Day. It's a World War II recruitment poster featuring Joe Louis. During World War II, heavyweight boxing champion Joe Louis set aside his lucrative boxing career to enlist in the Army. Wildly popular with both the African-American and white communities, his unfailing support of the war effort inspired many others to enlist. This 1942 poster, featuring a quote from a speech by Louis, encouraged African Americans of color to enlist into the Army. And I think it's a great artifact and shows how sports still plays a role in our everyday life today.
Next, we have Pamplin Historical Park from Petersburg, Virginia. This is an album quilt created in 1850 by the Ladies of Dinwiddie, as they say. This is a group of women who got together in Dinwiddie County to quilt and chat. And this album quilt, each lady in the group put together one of the pieces, and then they were all sewn together. These album quilts were usually put together as a going away gift for a member of the community. And it's amazing that it does exist in such great condition.
Okay, next up from the Southwest Virginia Museum Historical State Park in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. I have to say, one of the greatest things about the top 10 is we get always to get great selection from across the entire state, and having Southwest Virginia Museum here represented is excellent. This is the Jesse Zander collection. Jesse Reeser Zander collection is composed of photographs and documents chronicling the African American experience in Wise County, Virginia, from the 1940s through the early 2000s. Jesse Reeser Zander was born in the tiny coal mining community of Edmond, Virginia, where her father worked in the mines. And having access to something from 1940 to the early 2000s is fantastic for future researchers.
Now we're excited to be able to announce our People's Choice winner. So the 10 honorees each year are put to public vote. We put out all of the information about all 10, and then we let the general public decide which one they feel is the most interesting artifact and deserves the funding for conservation. And this year's People's Choice winner is from Old City Cemetery Museums and Arboretum in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it is an angel statue. It's a gravestone of Emmett Hamilton Jefferson. And I'm going to let the curator from Old City Cemetery tell you just a little bit more about this artifact.
name is marketing and event planner here at Old City Cemetery in Lynchburg, Virginia. Here at the cemetery, we have many different things across the ground, features, artifacts. They're just very recognized for some of the big structural things in the Old City Cemetery. But nothing is more iconic than the angel statue that commemorates the life of young girl. This is really an icon of the cemetery, the Lynchburg residents in general. And it's so important that it's here at the cemetery for many different reasons. One, because it's the only exact style gravestone we have. Another is just catch the eye. If someone drives in to see it, they stop their car, walk over here, and start exploring the section of the cemetery. Another is the artist. They love it. I've people paint them multiple times. Photographers, they love it. They'll come here. They catch the light right. But of course, more than anything, it does. And his family story explains why or maybe that. Why? His grandfather was born in the cemetery, but went on to his own farm. And farm stones are here. And they can be all across the whole spectrum. On the face of the as well as the there. The stones are the size that are very different. This is the best example. And it's kind of like the pointed top as well as the block left. And that's the stone. Very common area. And so through this trick, he was able to acquire a modest wealth for his family. But he also made a lot of mistakes in the stone. And so we believe that that's the reason that this stone stands here on the grandson. Through those connections, the family was able to acquire this stone that really otherwise wasn't able to be called this. And so we just love that. And we want to preserve as long as possible. All across the ground here, we have about 5,000 stones. So it's about 20,000 areas here. And it's a constant battle with forces of nature to keep these stones upright and looking nice to do. And the battle consists of limbs falling out of trees, hitting the stones, cracking them, with breaks them. The water in the ground freezing, twisting them, doing the same thing. And so it's just constantly looking for stones and trying to fix them. But we have a wonderful team of volunteers that does a fantastic job of doing that on most of our stones. But something like this is just too big a job for what they can do. And so fixing this angel statue has been on our radar for quite a while now, but we just haven't had the funding to do it. But this year we saw that VAM, or Virginia Association of Museums, was once again having their top 10 endangered artifact competition. And with a specific theme this year, focusing on underrepresented people groups in Virginia history. And so it was a natural fit for us to nominate the angel statue here. And thankfully we were chosen as one of the top 10 finalists. And even more thankfully, the people of Lynchburg and friends of the cemetery, even if they don't live here, we've had people from California that helped us out there. They voted for that statue as the artifact to win the $1,000 prize the family was offering. And thankfully, we were able to win that, and that's definitely going to spur this project weeks later this year. And with just the PR that came out of that, the Facebook post, the news articles that came out of it, more and more people started seeing it, started getting interested in it. And we've actually had several other donations for it. But we certainly could not have done it without that initial push that VAM helped us get. And so the restoration process, it'll first consist of leveling the statue. You can see it's kind of leaning over to the side. That comes from just the ground settling over time. It's been exacerbated this year from the unusual amount of rainfall we've had. And then there's been a groundhog that's actually tunneled beside it and compromised the wall of the grave shaft beside it, causing it to lean over even further. And so we think that if we don't shore it up soon, we might lose this icon in the cemetery, as well as falling on the stone beside and cracking that as well. And so the first order of business will be to actually to lift the stone into 4 pieces, set it to the side, and then Lynchburg City Public Works Department, who actually Lynchburg City owns the cemetery, every public ground here. Their public works crew is going to come in, put a footer down here, and then we'll move the deck back on top of it. They'll also add a retaining wall to keep the ground on tunneling and lateral pressure from giving. And so it'll be set back on that base, and then we'll have a conservator come here and do a modern cleaning on the main deck to restore some of its white marble look. And then a few pieces were broken off by vandals back in the 1950s, such as the nose and the wings. We'll have a sculptor come here and restore those as well. And so our end goal is to just preserve this for many more years, many more generations to come here, look at this, see it as a way to learn a little bit more of the story of William Jefferson. And then more than anything, for those of us working at the cemetery years in the future, to continue using this as a conduit to not only tell people about the Jefferson family, but also draw them to the section of the cemetery, which is predominantly African American, and tell that part of our history as well. And so once again, I'm so thankful to fans for hosting this competition and offering the prize money to kickstart this project.
Thank you to the Old City Cemetery for putting that great video together to let us know a little bit more about their piece. And we're so excited to see what happens when it gets conserved later this year. We'd like to finish today with introducing our Conservators Award winner. As Rob mentioned earlier, the Conservators and the other members of the selection committee get together with the top 10 honorees each year and decide which of the items they feel would benefit most from a bit of a bump in conservation funding. And this year they have chosen the Valentine in Richmond, Virginia, an afternoon dress designed and made by a Black Richmond dressmaker, Fanny Chris Payne. And they know a great deal about Fanny. And so it's exciting to hear more about this and see what happens with this dress. So I'm going to let them talk to you about this as well.
At the height of the Jim Crow era, Black entrepreneur Fanny Chris Payne was renowned as Richmond's premier dressmaker, and we are so grateful to the Virginia Association of Museums and those supporting the Top 10 Endangered Artifacts program. For helping the Valentine Museum to conserve a piece of her extraordinary legacy. This formal afternoon dress was created by Fanny Chris Payne in about 1904 for the daughter of a Richmond mayor and Virginia state senator. That same year, a Black Run magazine profiled Payne, noting, quote, "The finest dressmaker in Richmond, regardless of color, is Mrs. Fanny Chris Payne. Her list of patrons is made up of the best white families in Richmond. So great is their confidence in her ability and taste that many leave to her the selection of their entire outfit." End quote. Ultimately, Payne's business was so successful that she purchased 2 properties in Richmond's bustling Black community, Jackson Ward, including a stately home on the elite Lee Street block known as Quality Row. The secret to Payne's extraordinary success in the segregated South is evident in the skillful execution of this design. Despite extensive damage, we can see that this elegant formal afternoon dress of cream silk satin and chiffon once featured a high-laced neckline bound by a satin band and trimmed with metal-wrapped cord and feather-stitched embroidery. An extremely fashionable neckline for the period. Every detail is considered, and even the seams of the skirt are embroidered over with lustrous silk floss in a repeating pattern of stars. This gown represents the height of fashion and luxury at the turn of the 20th century. Fanny Chris Payne was an artist. Her designs capture the fashionable spirit of the age and were sought after even by clients who were otherwise unwilling to recognize her status as an equal citizen. Unfortunately, the delicate silk mesh and lace that gave early 20th century formal wear its ephemeral elegance, is prone to deterioration, and without conservation, these textiles will continue to degrade. Thanks to the generous support of the Virginia Association of Museums Selection Committee Award, the Valentine will work with DC area textile conservator Julia Brennan to stabilize and preserve this fragile artifact for future generations. Conservation treatments will enable the Valentine to place this awe-inspiring artifact on rotation in our core exhibition gallery, where visitors come to learn about the history of the city of Richmond, Virginia. With many thanks again to the Virginia Association of Museums Top 10 Endangered Artifacts program, the Valentine can continue to educate and inspire visitors with the story of the trailblazing Black business owner and professional woman, Fannie Chris Payne, whose incredible career defied both segregation and sexism in the South at the turn of the 20th century. At the height of the Jim Crow era, Black entrepreneur Fannie Chris Payne was renowned.
It's that great of an artifact, we want to do it twice.
We want to do it twice, right. Well, I just want to close today by congratulating all of our honorees this year, and especially the winner of our People's Choice Award and our Conservators Award this year. Thank you to both of you for putting together these videos to help everyone better understand your pieces and why they're important to the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia and our heritage. We are so proud to offer this program at the Virginia Association Museums. We're so thankful to all of our partners, to all of the people who serve on our selection committee, and all of those museums that put together nominations and help get the word out to get votes so that this program can serve to let people know how important artifacts are to telling the story of Virginia. Thank you all, and thank you, Rob, for being here with me, and have a wonderful day.